Hello, BookTube. I've got a wee bit of mail for you just to keep our tenuous little streak going. It's a beautiful, beautiful, cool day. Just another gorgeous, scoured, clean day here in Boston. I think we're going to pay the penalty for this. It looks to me like Boston has a long string of cloudy, rainy days coming up next week, perhaps even the whole week. But up until then, smooth sailing. And I have already opened a few packages off camera, but I saved one and one periodical. The periodical is a double issue. No, this is a single issue of The New Yorker. Look at that, $9 price tag. Good Lord. You really does pay you to subscribe to The New Yorker. I think that was their whole point. And the cover, of course, is Betsy Ross sewing a flag, only the flag is a dollar bill. And this issue had some very interesting things in it. One thing in it was absolutely infuriating. The talk of the town is at the beginning of every issue of The New Yorker. In this one, it's all about the upcoming midterms, especially the midterm contests in key battleground states, swing states where it could make a big difference. And the article talks about, for instance, J.D. Vance, the author of Hillbilly Elegy, who was an ardent critic of Donald Trump for a long time, said that he has Hitlerian qualities, that he's not to be trusted, that he's a blight on American politics, and now is a lickspittle. He has kissed the ring. He licks Donald Trump's boots whenever he has any chance to. He has totally reinvented himself in a way, to an extent, that is absolutely psychotic. And yet, he is polling equal with his opponent, whose name is Tim Ryan. And the article goes on about their sparring and debate, and Tim Ryan at one point said Donald Trump mocked J.D. Vance in public, on camera, on stage, for kissing his ass. And Ryan said in one of their debates, I don't know anyone growing up in Ohio, going to high school in Ohio, I don't know anyone who would let someone take their dignity like that. That it baffles me. J.D. Vance claimed on stage that it was a joke. It isn't very convincing. That isn't very convincing. It didn't sound like a joke. It sounded vicious and mean, like everything Donald Trump says. But the article also talks about John Fetterman versus Mehmet Oz, the fake TV doctor who's not a resident of the state where he's running. And in every case, the article pitches the Republican opponents as being just sort of wacky. Just sort of, this is a wacky, tight race. There's all sorts of verbal pyrotechnics going on. As opposed to, the article only briefly mentions that this is not, less wacky versus more wacky. This is flawed, normal Democratic candidates versus avatars of pure evil, people who don't believe Donald Trump is still president. When J.D. Vance says the president enacted something, the president did this, the president did that, he's talking about Donald Trump. And he's not talking about Donald Trump giving him the courtesy of calling former presidents by President so-and-so. He believes Donald Trump is still president. They're all well-versed in this kind of lying. All of them are. When you ask them directly, is Joe Biden president, they'll say, yes, he's president. He won the election. He's president. You have to ask them more specifics than that. They become comfortable with playing you. There's always that crap-eating grin on their face when they say things like that, because they have conferred with each other as to what ground to give so that they're not just summarily dismissed as lunatics. If in 2022, bordering on 2023, you say Donald Trump is currently president, well, that's how you fail a cognition test. That's not how you are, defiant to own the libs. That will get you locked up against your own will. And they know that. So they'll say, he's in the White House. You have to ask them more specifically than that. Is Joe Biden legitimately president of the United States? If you ask them that, they'll say no. And since the United States can't not have a president, the next question that every single mainstream interviewer should ever ask these people, and in fact none of them do, but every one of them should, is, well, if Joe Biden isn't the legitimate president, is Donald Trump the legitimate president? All you have to do is add that one adjective, and suddenly they are ready for the rubber room. But all of these candidates want punitive, vicious, nationwide abortion bans. All of them have eyed a women's right to unrestricted voting. all of them have all sorts of unbelievably repressive social agendas that they're right out in the open about against any kind of minority group in any way. Not because it aligns with their political beliefs. They don't have any more than the Republican Party does. The political beliefs here are the whims of Donald Trump today. That's all. The Republican Party does not have a platform. Its platform is whatever Donald Trump says today. But it's not just that. That's not the only reason. It doesn't line up with their political principles. It's just that they know that it fires up their base, who don't care about the policies either. They only care about the anger, the savagery of it. The cruelty, as was said ad nauseum in 2020, is the point. And this article never gets to that at all. At one point, it mentions the Wisconsin race. Ron Johnson, this comically, buffoonishly corrupt politician, and his opponent, Mandela Barnes, who is well-spoken, really intelligent, totally convinced, totally consistent, beloved by everyone who knows him. Never had a family member turn on him like Ron Johnson has in The Bucket Load. And the article mentions that the January 6th committee has linked Johnson to Trump's fake elector scheme. The January 6th committee has underscored documents that link Johnson to the fake elector scheme. Johnson was part of a scheme to defraud the U.S. government. He is a felon. He was part of the scheme to create a fake slate of electors for the state of Wisconsin that were going for Donald Trump instead of against him, when he knew that wasn't true. He knew that wasn't how the electors of his state, he just made it up. He got a boilerplate blank form from Rudy Giuliani and added willing co-conspirators to it. That is several different kinds of felony. It's not that the January 6th committee linked him to it, it's that he is linked to it. They make it sound in this article like it's he said, she said, and it's not. And they don't allude to the fact that Ron Johnson is a monster, that he not just that he wants Donald Trump to rule this country. He doesn't want Donald Trump to be president. President is, nominally anyway, the subject of checks and balances. He wants Donald Trump to rule this country. It's not just that, though. It's that he's a monster, and Mandela Barnes is not. On camera, in a gaggle after a campaign event, a supporter of his came up to him and said that he thought that Mandela Barnes, who's black, should be tending his field, Ron Johnson's field, instead of running against him in the race. And Johnson laughed his head off. It was maddening, and it's in the front. It's the very first thing in the New Yorker, so that's just incredibly infuriating. That, especially when we're so close to the midterms, the last flicker of representative democracy in this country. There was also a funny article. I couldn't help but think of Jordan Parsons. There's a funny article in here about the fact that in the wake of the very worst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the first 5 or 6 months of 2020. I think you've probably seen the news reports. All of those gigantic office parks and gigantic towering office skyscrapers in New York and other big cities, but especially New York, just became empty. They just emptied out. People were staying at home. They were at first doing nothing, and then they were telecommuting. They were doing Zoom. They were working at home. They weren't going into those office buildings. So that in, June of 2020, you could look at one of those 100-story office buildings, and it would be mostly empty all day long. A couple of floors, maybe a few people, 100 out of the 6,000 that usually work there. And there's an article here at the front of the magazine about, it's by Charles Bethia, and it's about the fact that those buildings weren't actually empty that whole time and this whole time since. As is true, as any of you will know if you watch nature, it abhors a vacuum. And as soon as the rat population nearby in downtown Manhattan realized that these offices were unoccupied, and that therefore regular pest control services were no longer patrolling the halls and fumigating the walls, they moved in en masse and have stayed there ever since. There's a whole article about that, about how there's the illustration, how they simply cannot be convinced to leave. One person in the article mentions that they've practically got offices of their own. And then there were a number of okay cartoons in here, but there was one really good one that I really, really liked. This is the cartoon here, the wife on the phone talking to her husband who's sitting there reading a book, which is kind of odd. He wouldn't be reading a book. But the caption is, "We're having the Petersons over for dinner. Do you think you could run down to the store and stay there for a few hours?" That was pretty good. And also, I also in this article, I want to read you a poem. There's a poem in here that I don't quite know what to think about, and every time I encounter a poem in the New Yorker or anywhere, and I don't quite know what to think about it, I like reading it to you because oftentimes I get lots of tips on how to think about it. I think I quite like it, but I'm not sure what it is. This is by Emily Fragos, and it's called The Night Nurse. The night nurse turns me in my bed and changes the white sheets under me. They are wet, they are soiled, and the night nurse washes my face and changes my gown. I am clean and refreshed because of the night nurse. The night nurse comes to me with a pill in a tiny cup. I take the pill from her beautiful hands, and the night nurse takes away my pain, so that I may sleep without plague of dreams or fear of never waking. The moon is out. The night nurse does not notice. The night nurse only watches me. I am life and death to the night nurse. I am more important to the night nurse than the full pink moon over which the poets obsess. The night nurse comes flying low over me like a silent drone. The heart is beating peacefully like an upside-down bat. The heart is racing like a Serengeti cheetah. The heart must be listened to, beat by beat, minute by minute. The night nurse knows my heart like no one else on earth. The night nurse comes with a needle. I would cringe with anyone else, but the night nurse slips the hypodermic under my skin and into the blue vein, and I do not mind, for I've given myself up. The night nurse needs my blood, and I will gladly give her my blood. What do you make of that? Of course, I've said before, it's only nominally a poem. It's set up, 2-line, 2-line, 2-line. There is nothing to distinguish. There are commas that end half those 2 lines. There's nothing to distinguish why this would be so. The stanza breaks happen often, in fact, mostly often, in the middle of conceptual units, literally in the middle of thoughts. So there's no reason for it to look like that. It could have been a paragraph. But I don't know what to make of it. Did you like it? I'm wondering if it's just, if maybe it's tapping into all sorts of personal memories. I mean, Miss Sainted Ma at the very end of her life had a night nurse, and when we would have 20-minute conversations every day. Often they would be at night, and often we were on the phone when the night nurse came into the room. So I was able to overhear some of their very business-like conversation. Miss Sainted Ma could barely do anything on her own and was looking forward to the visit of the night nurse for cleaning her up and getting her ready for bed. And I would just hear that. It was all very matter of fact. It was all very. Miss Sainted Ma came from a generation that did not do sentiment, so it was all very businesslike. It was, should I put this down? Are you here for me? Am I going to need my hands? What help am I going to need to give you, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if that's reading into it or not, but I'm wondering what you think about the night nurse. But anyway, that was the periodical, was the New Yorker, and then we have one package which has a bit of heft to it, so it may be a finished copy, which is good. I'm always on the lookout for finished copies. Let's see. I'm not sure that this is the only mail that will come today. There might be more. Oh, no, I was wrong. This is an advance copy. It's just pretty big. What have we got here? This is from the folks at W.W. Norton, who I deeply love. They're my favorite non-Penguin publisher. Very odd. The pub sheet is just blurbs. Do I have an actual pub sheet in here? Anything else? No, I don't. Wow, they just sent me a blurb sheet. Well, I don't really want a blurb sheet. It's not. I mean, that's interesting, I suppose, but I don't really. I don't really need to know what anybody else is thinking of this thing. Let's just look at the book. So it comes out in February. I'm building a very sizable collection of 2023 books. I remember when it was just starting, but now it's a couple of whole shelves. This is by Paul Shar, and it is 4 Battlegrounds, Power in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. So right up my alley, something I'd very much like to read, but I've already overindulged myself in reading 2023 releases, so I will let this go. So the author is a former U.S. Army Ranger who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he's the Vice President and Director of Studies at the Center for the New American Security. Sounds like a think tank. And he lives in Virginia. I bet I know exactly where he lives in Virginia. I bet I could almost identify the street where he lives in Virginia. So what have we got here? Let's see what... This has blurbs all over it, but it will have a description, I'm sure, somewhere. No, it's just yet more blurbs. All right, well, we'll read the back like we were in a bookstore, right? If you saw this in a bookstore, you would flip it over immediately and read it. If you have a retail bookstore, I envy you. There are no retail bookstores in Boston. I wish there were, although I've heard rumors. I keep hearing a persistent rumor that there is now a new bookstore, a new retail bookstore, Beacon Hill Books, over by the State House. I don't know if this is true. I'll have to walk up there the next time I'm in that neighborhood and see if there is. I've been told that it is really shishi, that it's nice, it has a little cafe, that it's 4 stories. That ordinarily you'd think would make me really happy, but it's been my experience that when you get a bookstore like that, you also get fascists. That if it's not a chain bookstore, it will be a fascist bookstore. So if you were to walk in and say, do you have the works of John W. Campbell? Or do you have any of the Harry Potter books, any J.K. Rowling books that I can read? Or what's another thing? What is a Woman by Matt Walsh. He did a kid's book, right, about a walrus. In other words, that there will be direct censorship. There'll be direct ideological control over what books they have, and that control will be very eagerly shared with you as a customer. You will have to right-think in order to be a customer there. I worry that that's what I'm going to encounter. There's like I've mentioned before, there's a store like that, much smaller it sounds like, but there's a store like that that's within 5 minutes walk from me. It's up on the main street. I would be their most regular customer if I thought that's what they were like, but I know that's not what they're like. I know that's not what they're like. I encounter these people all the time. I encountered on Twitter just the other day a bookseller who proudly mentioned that when somebody comes into her store and asks for an author that she doesn't like, she reads them the Riot Act about how that the author had political opinions that disagree with the ones she currently holds at this moment right now in her own personal life, and that therefore the customer shouldn't want them. She won't take them to show them the books, and she will make a correct suggestion instead. Horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. I would turn on my heel and walk out of such a store if somebody did such a thing. And when I worked in a retail bookstore, at an information desk at a retail bookstore, I would have made sure that a coworker of mine who did something like that was fired that day. So, but it has become the norm. It has completely triumphed. It's all over academia, of course. You can't speak out of turn in academia. It's all over Hollywood, big and small screen. And it tends to infest bookstores, unless they are part of a big impersonal chain. I've been to 2 Books A Million. I've liked both of them a lot. No hint of anything like that. Of course, I used to work at a Barnes & Noble. There is no hint of anything like that. None whatsoever. I don't know if Barnes & Nobles are like that now. Do you have a Barnes & Noble near you? Is it like that? Where they police what you like and don't like? Do you get a little face for an employee if you mention a book they don't like? But anyway, if you have the luxury of a retail bookstore and you flip this over, this is what you will read. Like prior industrial revolutions, artificial intelligence will cause profound disruptions in the balance of global power. This book takes readers inside the fierce competition to develop and implement this extraordinary new technology. Autonomous weapons expert Paul Shar articulates the 4 key elements that will define this struggle: data, computer power, talent, and institutions. Okay, don't those define any struggle? They are very vague. And examines the strengths and weaknesses of today's AI superpowers, China, the United States, and the European Union. With unique access to leading Chinese AI companies, examines the strengths and weaknesses of today's AI superpowers, China, the United States, and the European Union. How weird. What a weirdly 19th century way to look at things. No mention of Google. No mention of Apple, who are much greater AI superpowers than China or the European Union, for Pete's sake. They can't even get their outlets straight. No mention of Google. That is so strange. I imagine the book will redress that. With unique access to leading Chinese AI companies, that might, Pentagon leadership and American technology startups, that might explain it, right? If to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, it could be that he's tailoring his story to who he had access to. The author explores the tensions between military leadership and each country's tech giants who control access to this game-changing technology. He offers vivid examples of how AI will transform warfare, as well as the challenges democracies must overcome to shape the emerging world order. Engaging and direct, this book is an urgent book with implications for the future of human freedom and global security. Okay, well, I absolutely love this subject, so I will be on this right away, a long time from now. First, I'm going to deal with the rest of 2022. Then 2023 can fend for itself. So that's our one book. There's already been 2 mail deliveries today. I think 1 more is coming, but this sounds good. Definitely put it on your list if you're interested in that sort of thing. And in the meantime, tell me about your retail bookstores again. I collect these experiences now. I will have to do a scouting report of my own. I'll have to go to Beacon Hill Books, if that's the name of it, and see what it's like. None of this, excoriating them in absentia. I'll go and see what they're like. I'll take pictures, maybe even film some footage inside it. It's not that far off my route. If it's anywhere near where I think it is, it's right near my library. It's right near all of my old cronies at the State House. It's right near my favorite restaurant in Boston. It would be possible to do. If any of you are in the Boston area and have actually been there, feel free to sing out. But anyway, until then, I'm going to wrap this up for now. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.